distinguished guests on the platform, those of you joining us virtually or online, delegates, participants in the audience, good evening. Welcome to this thematic session on early and early action. My name is Keith Campbell, and I'm currently the CEO of the Jamaica Public Broadcasting Corporation of Jamaica. As a full member and a director, I have been given the honor and responsibility to represent the Caribbean Broadcasting Union, the CBU, at this very important conference, the 7th Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction. With a membership of approximately 40 media entities across the Caribbean, this conference is of particular importance to the member stations of the CBU. This, with the start of the hurricane season approximately a week away, and given the devastation as a result of increased activities and intensity of rains in recent years, the CBU considers its participation as most opportune and timely. The Union considers the rapid dissemination of information in early warning systems as vital in support of early action. Accordingly, and in any discourse or deliberations to advance and or achieve the Sendai global target by 2030, investments are a must to establish a rapid system of information as integral to any efficient early warning system. Having listened to a number of the sessions since Monday, and given the stated objective of this session, the following must be considered in any effort to accelerate the delivery of Target G of the Sendai Framework by 2030, which is less than a decade away. As follows. 1, engagement of the disabled community and other marginalized groups towards the creation of any solutions. Increase efforts to promote public and private partnerships and the inclusion of communities in the decision-making process. Welcome everybody to this session on the early warning and early action. As I mentioned previously, in the Caribbean, we annually, from June to November 30, experience hurricanes. They are fast and furious in recent times, and the devastation when it hits an island is increasingly more dangerous than before. The devastation is unbelievable, and therefore, at this point in time, a week away, and the prediction is that it's going to be a very active season with some 6 storms that will be considered more than just a storm, hurricanes. Mention that the call of the Secretary General during World Meteorological Day to make EWS available to all within 5 years will scale up the efforts to achieve the Sendai target. The early warning was discussed in depth over the last 2 days during the Multi-Hazard Early Warning Conference, and today's discussion will be built on the finding of the conference. The session will therefore examine the progress and challenges in delivering on Target G of the Sendai Framework, and furthermore, it will outline avenues to accelerate implementation of people-centered multi-hazard early warning systems that enable early action, and minimizing disasters, thus reducing risks and contributing to the strengthened resilience. Correctly, this session aims at ensuring that progress towards achieving Target G, with inclusive and effective multi-hazard approaches to early warning system that will enable early action by 2030. To explore challenges and solutions in monitoring progress on Target G. And to demonstrate value and benefits of investments in multi-hazard, multi-level early warning system and in early action and preparedness at national and the local level. Implementation of EWEA to be more effectively delivered on Target G, for example, reinforce partnerships for evidence-based gender transformation and inclusive EWEA systems with enhanced contribution to reduce risk, disaster impact, and resilience. Before starting the substantial part of the session, I have to explain realities and housekeeping. If you're watching online and you wish to follow the session in one of the 6 UN languages, you can select the language channel in the box to the right of the video window. It is very important that you mute the audio from the video player. Otherwise, hear the original language plus the interpretation. There is a short video on the reception page that explains how to do this. Slide will be used for polls and question and answers during this session. In-room participants can connect on slido.com using their mobile phones and insert the code that is shown on the room screen. For questions following us online in Hopian, please access the tab Polls and Q&A on the right-hand side of the menu. The poll results will be shown towards the end of the session. If you are in the room and are unable to use Slido, please raise your hand and the in-room support staff will assist you. If you are in Hopian and you are unable to use the polls and Q&A tab or in any other Hopian feature, please contact the online support team via the chat box. And now, it is time for us to do some business, serious business. And I will introduce my first keynote speaker, Cyril Honore. His career developed with a strong user focus in operational meteorology, competence development, regional and international cooperation, bringing him to join the WMO Secretariat in 2008. Before he goes to the podium, I have a question. What are the key outcomes of the MHEWC-3 and what are the priorities for until 2030?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. And the speech I'm going to deliver now is precisely aiming at answering these questions. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, we are on a pathway to global warming of more than double the 1.5 degrees Celsius limit that was agreed in Paris in 2015. Extreme weather, the day-to-day face of climate change, cost us hundreds of billions of dollars last year. While hundreds of millions of people in India and Pakistan are currently dealing with an intense heat wave, new science, published just last week, tells us that record-breaking heat in this region is now 100 times more likely thanks to human-caused climate change. And the toll of human lives is beyond measure. Food and water insecurity, displacement, conflict, weather and climate shocks are pushing us, especially the most vulnerable, to unbearable levels. The Glasgow Climate Pact emphasized the need to mobilize climate finance from all sources, including significant increasing support for developing countries beyond 100 billion per year. The pact also urged developed countries to at least double their provision of climate finance for adaptation. The recently published IPCC Working Group 2 recognized that early warning systems are a proven feasible adaptation option that have broad applicability across sectors and provide greater benefits to other adaptation measures when combined. And yet, we know that too many people on our planet, especially those in developing countries, are not yet adequately protected by early warning systems. And on World Met Day, as it was said, Secretary General Guterres asked the World Meteorological Organization to lead an effort to achieve global coverage of early warning systems in the next 5 years and to present an action plan to achieve these goals at the next UN Climate Conference. And so the WMO was pleased to work with partners from the INEWS network and beyond to co-organize the third multi-hazard early warning conference, which took place Monday and Tuesday this week. The conference provided the first opportunity to convene, take stock of progress, and identify priorities for the Alerts for All action plan, which will be presented in Egypt. More than 750 women and men, representative of local, national, regional institutions, civil society organizations, and experts contributed to the conference discussions. Over the last 2 days, participants identified a number of gaps and related needs and priorities. First, since 2015, 95 of the 120 countries reporting progress against the Sendai Target G indicated that they had multi-hazard early warning systems in place. However, less than half of LDCs and less than 1/3 of SIDS reported having a multi-hazard early warning system. So in addition to the need to increase the number of countries reporting on Target G, the metrics for measuring the effectiveness of early warning systems needs also to be strengthened, in particular regarding availability, access, and readiness to act. Second, the accountability of the governments at all levels was stressed in ensuring access to people-centered early warning systems designed with the last mile in mind and enabling anticipatory action through impact forecasting. Support for inclusive, enhanced, and coherent governance mechanisms and cooperation is required, along with the integration of early warnings into disaster risk reduction planning and climate change adaptation strategies within and across sectors. Third, the need for adequate hazard exposure, vulnerability, and impact data was referred to multiple times. 53 countries that reported to the Sendai Monitor indicate that they do not have access to understandable and usable disaster risk information that are fit for purpose. Data needs to be fair, meaning findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, a need for sound and standardized processes for data collection, sustainable data sharing methods, and sufficient capacities and tools for analysis, overlaying with hazard prediction to inform decision-making and enabling local action. Modern information and communication technology offer opportunities to improve and tailor early warning data and services that can facilitate preventive and anticipatory action. However, challenges remain regarding access or capacity to use them. Further efforts are required to raise awareness about the benefits of the use of novel ICTs and common alerting protocol to reach those at risk with multiple types of messages in different formats linked to national emergency telecommunication plans. Highlighting the necessity of public-private engagement, there was a strong commitment to better understand how to work with private sector actors, including local businesses, SMEs, social enterprises, and a strong recommendation to create space to facilitate transparent and open discussions to better understand sectors' needs, perspectives, and expectations, and including putting the right policies in place, developing relevant models to ensure viable collaborations. Participants particularly from African countries, referred to the lack of robust observation networks. Observations are one of the key components for the establishment of early warning systems based on objective data. The Global Basic Network and the Global Ocean Observing Systems to further enhance and expand observation systems, as well as the recent WMO data policy supporting the international exchange of observational ocean and climate data, ensuring that sustained observations are aligned with global technical standards that also meet the requirements and needs of a broad suite of users. Sustainable Observation Financing Facility also received high level and initial commitment, considering the cost of closing the data gaps in these countries is marginal in comparison with the benefits of early warnings based on sound data. The ever-growing need for effective, inclusive, and gender-responsive early warning systems and actions and its urgency was reiterated. Without gender, age, disability, and location data, any preemptive action will fail to be inclusive. Women's full and equal access to early warning information and leadership in early warning communication is crucial for improved early preparation, risk reduction during extreme weather events and health emergencies, enhanced community protection services and referral pathways, and the realization of women's rights and gender equality. Early warning systems remain most effective when they are localized and people-centered. It needs to factor local, indigenous knowledge system to reduce and manage multi-hazard risk and to adapt to climate shocks and events. And further, we need to better understand risk for ecosystems and explore nature-based solutions in the design of early warning systems. Financing to scale that is sustained, flexible, and enables innovative solutions is required to facilitate anticipatory action into reality. Targeted development and humanitarian cooperation is essential to strengthen early warning systems with a sufficient focus on the so-called last mile that lead to anticipatory action. This approach requires pre-arranged institutional arrangement to enable anticipatory action. And evidence of the early warning systems in reducing human, economic, and infrastructure losses is critical for justifying investment. However, targeting investment requires to assess the sensitive warning value to the performance of each contributor to the production of the warning. And we currently have no tool available to carry out such sensitivity analysis. The conference organizers agreed that these priorities would be highlighted and advocated in this early action global platform session, which is now done, and in the GP at large. Beyond this conference, organizations and partners that are interested to contribute are invited to register their interest and align projects or programs for inclusion in WMO's mapping efforts. All forces from UN agencies, governments, private sector, NGOs will be welcome and needed so that we collectively meet the ambitious call of the UNSG. Please flash the QR code that has been displayed in the room today. Next steps will include an event at the margin of UNGA in late September to take stock of progress, provide spotlight on outstanding gaps, and the outcomes of it will be an important input to the midterm review of the Sendai Framework, which will culminate in another high-level UN General Assembly event next year. It is clear that achieving global coverage of early warning systems will only be possible if all actors across the early warning to early action value cycle raise their ambition and accelerate action. International cooperation is this moment. So in the coming days, I challenge us all to think about what is working well, to take a critical look at areas where we must improve. Please explore how we can work better together. Together, in unified effort, we can accelerate delivery on the aspirations of UNSG's call the Paris Agreement, Sendai Framework, and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and achieve a resilient and just world. It was my pleasure to deliver this message on behalf of Petri Talas, Secretary General of WMO, and I thank you for your attention. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Honore, for that. The underlying statement there is that acceleration is absolutely necessary if we are to achieve target G by 2030. Our next speaker, keynote speaker, is Dr. Enamur Rahman. He is a Bangladeshi physician, businessman, politician, incumbent state minister, and a member of parliament. As a state minister, he brought a special prestigious achievement for the country, United Nations Public Service Award 2021, one of his achievements in the Gender Responsive Service category for achieving SDGs. I have a question or two for you, Minister, before you speak. One is, how can EWS articulate it with other risk management actions in order to assure its continuity over time and enhance contribution to reduce risk as well as minimizing impacts? Secondly, what are the current opportunities and challenges to enhance effective and inclusive governance and sustained financing for EWS? Over to you, sir.
Here, the board. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Excellencies, Honorable distinguished guests, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon and Assalamu alaikum. It is my great pleasure to speak at the auspicious event in the thematic session of GPDRR on early warning and early action. Bangladesh is world's 7th position in climate-related disasters last decade, according to the Climate Risk Index 2021, published by German Watch, where 76.9% of people are the exposure to multi-hazard risk, mostly climate-related disasters, as stated by UN SCAP 2019. Despite the vulnerability, Bangladesh has improved its early warning system and enhanced the capacity in tackling multi-hazard risks. And Bangladesh has been branding as role model of disaster management. As we know, Target G of Sendai Framework is specified to increase in the availability and access to multi-hazard early warning and disaster risk information to the people by 2030. So early warning systems are prerequisites for effective early action in reducing the loss and damage. Respected Chair, learned panelists, distinguished guests, Bangladesh has improved a lot in early warning in terms of generating accurate warning, disseminating to the last mile well ahead. We have considered the early warning is an integral part of, with other risk management action for continuity, sustain over the time to reduce risk as well as minimizing the impacts. To strengthen early warning system, we have developed and updated relevant policies, plans and platforms, especially applying the Sendai Framework for disaster risk reduction in 2015. Under the purview of the Disaster Management Act 2012, Standing Orders of Disaster SOD 2019 has been revised with contemporary proactive risk management concept through integration of early warning and early action. Aiming to the whole of society approach, SOD contains the roles and functions of all stakeholders from central level to local level through gender responsive and inclusive disaster management committees. We formed National Task Force on Forecast-Based Action, is working with all relevant stakeholders under with this platform. We are preparing the action plan for anticipatory action to be working under this task force. I am happy to inform you that government has established system to run advanced and decentralized evacuation, humanitarian relief distribution before cyclone, floods and other disasters hit on the ground. Through Cyclone Preparedness Program, CPP, Bangladesh has demonstrated how people-centered early warning and early action can substantially reduce disaster loss and damage involved over the last 5 decades. We have 76,000 cyclone preparedness volunteers, while 50% are women, are instrumental to saving lives and protects assets. It was worth to mention over 5 million volunteers in our country are now acting at the grassroots, engaged in early warning dissemination and response to disasters. The lead time of flood early warning has increased and now are giving days of probabilistic forecasting. We are piloting dynamic flood risk model that provides depth of water, flood duration, and inundation level within the early warning to promote early action. Ladies and gentlemen, Bangladesh has battled the twin perils of a super cyclone Amphan and COVID-19 in May 2020. We evacuated 2.4 million people to the 14,400 cyclone shelters within a day, following the protocol of early warning and early action. While we prepared 10,000 additional shelters on top of the existing shelters at the Amphan-affected areas on the coast. To contain the spreading of COVID-19, we distributed sanitizers and medical distance in the shelters. Apart from Cyclone Amphan, the country faced 5 times flood in 2020, affected 33 districts out of 64. Lead time of the flood warning assisted took early action in the form of evacuating people to the shelters, that saving lives and reducing economic loss. Dear guests and participants, the recent cyclone and floods in a pandemic have appeared as compound and cascading disasters with several challenges, including risk governance needed to address for resilience. Managing such disasters requires new sets of knowledge and skills. We got critical learning to deal with the cascading disaster towards risks to resilience. We found the lessons are critical and useful for scaling up regionally and internationally, and we are keen to share our experience. In terms of financing and delivery mechanism, the government with non-government actors has been working on a pilot basis to establish forecast-based early action at the field level for the past 4 years. We are working for proactive solution towards increase the investment to enhance effective and inclusive governance. Here, regional and international experiences and learning can be useful, and we are eager to share the best practice among ourselves. We have also formulated National Disaster Management Rules 2021 for mobilizing resources and ensuring the financial system for effective disaster risk reduction through using the protocol of effective early warning and early action. Bangladesh has leveraging the opportunities to use enablers and platforms from international levels. The Risk-Informed Early Action Platform RIP initiative was formally launched by the Honorable Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina, during the Climate Action Summit in 2019. Learned speaker, participants. Regarding the investment for early warning facilities, the government with development partners has already worked on the modernization of meteorological observation system, especially based early warning for cyclones, floods, and working is operational that tries to take the opportunities of advanced technology. Government with its National Resilience Program, NRP, has been working for a people-centered and science-based flood early warning to support early action. Now we are working to institutionalize the flood preparedness program, FPP, based on learning on CPP, which is recognized as global practice of disaster risk management. Ladies and gentlemen, during the pandemic situation, apart Bangladesh achieved the LDC graduation status. We find our well-established warning mechanism in the disaster risk management system contributed to the LDC graduation by reducing the volatility. We are strengthening both disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation programs for achieving the targets in the framework for disaster risk reduction and Paris Agreement. The government of Bangladesh supports UN agencies and other international agencies and development partners in jointly implementing early action, thereby up the reaching more people. Dear participants, no doubt early action with quality forecasts can reduce humanitarian needs after extreme weather events. We have to create more evidence of the impact from forecast-based action. I would like to focus on the following issues, with our collective action playing a vital role in consolidating early warning and action. Number one, regional and international cooperation for knowledge, information, and technology sharing are vital for building disaster and climate resilience. Therefore, it becomes one of the critical issues for the establishment of regional disaster risk communication and financing mechanism for combating disaster. Number two, real-time data sharing in climate-induced hazards among the neighboring countries are pivotal for generating early warning and their dissemination. We expect to get real-time data and risk-related climatic information around the transboundary rivers, while GPDRR, AMPCDRR, and other platforms like RIP initiatives can be useful to widen our partnership. We are enhancing efforts through forecast-based early action task force. We are also keen to work together and share our success and experience on anticipatory action. Finally, I hope that thematic session will bring some durable solution through deliberation from learned speakers and consultants to address the challenges in early warning and action. I also look forward to the session for interactive discussion and sharing knowledge and information that would be documented and shared among policy and decision makers, partners around the world. I thank to UNDRR, the government of Indonesia, and other organizers across the globe for organizing this important event. With this note, I would like to conclude my speech. Thank you all, and assalamu alaikum again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rahman, for that detailed presentation, and we look forward to the sharing of information. At this juncture, I would like to inform those online and in-person participants that you can rely on the questions, reply to the questions, and that results will be shown after the three of the presentations. Let me repeat that. Would like to remind online and in-person participants to reply to the questions, and the results will be shown after 3 presentations. Polling in Slido, what should be done to make EWS more effective? Choose a maximum of 2. Upgrading observation and forecasting, reaching the last mile with actionable and accessible information, making EWS inclusive by putting people at the center, enabling actors to translate EW into early action, increasing investment in ICT, upscaling of financing mechanisms, and enhancing government framework. At this point, I would now like to introduce my next speaker, and she'll be joining us online. Miluska Ordonez. Let me try and repeat that. Miss Miluska Ordonez. And I have a question for her. How to strengthen communications and preparedness mechanism for early warning action to reach and involve all at risk. Over to you.
Ok, buenos días aquí en Perú, buenas noches en Bali, mis saludos a todas y todos en la sala, para agradecer la oportunidad que nos dan de poder presentar nuestra experiencia. Para fortalecer los mecanismos de comunicación y preparación para la alerta y la acción temprana, estos deben ser planificados e implementados con las comunidades, involucrando a los diversos actores en sus diversos componentes de los sistemas de alerta temprana. Es decir, consideramos que la preparación tiene que ser parte de una estrategia articulada de empoderamiento local. Desde Practical Action compartimos nuestra experiencia en impulsar sistemas de alerta temprana integrales e inclusivos que contribuyen a la resiliencia comunitaria. Si bien se cuenta con marcos globales como Sendai y normativas nacionales que buscan una gestión del riesgo y sistemas de alerta temprana integrales e inclusivos, la articulación entre los diversos componentes y diversos actores consideramos que aún es un reto. En Practical Action hemos visto esto en diversos contextos y en distintas perspectivas. Tanto en comunidades muy pequeñas como en comunidades que se encuentran en toda la cuenca, por ejemplo, en Perú. Una de las cuencas que trabajamos es la cuenca del río Rímac. Los riesgos de desastres también se han incrementado por diversos factores, así como que también el cambio climático está exacerbando cada día más el comportamiento, por ejemplo, de las lluvias y las inundaciones, que ha variado en su frecuencia y intensidad. Nosotros hemos heredado, además de ello, una situación de profunda carencia de datos e información científica que sea posible, que se use para tomar decisiones oportunas, acciones anticipatorias y gestionar los riesgos. Frente a ello, se requiere que las comunidades sean puestas en valor y sean actores dinámicos con capacidad de decisión y participación activa. Nosotros como Practical Action consideramos que toda persona en situación de riesgo y vulnerabilidad tiene derecho a recibir información oportuna, veraz y accesible, y además a proponer y articularse a diversas acciones de preparación y respuesta hacia la construcción de resiliencia. Esto solo es posible si se garantiza una comunicación efectiva que que salvaguarde vidas con comunidades como actores dinámicos y no solamente con poblaciones que reciben información como entes pasivos. Por ello es necesario impulsar la articulación entre los diferentes elementos, lo técnico, lo científico y lo comunitario. Entender a los TAC de una manera sistémica, integrada e inclusiva. Esta articulación se basa en el intercambio de información, tanto la generada por las instituciones científicas, académicas y la misma comunidad. En nuestra experiencia, por ejemplo, ha sido muy importante para nosotros iniciar nuestro proceso impulsando y midiendo el nivel de resiliencia comunitaria, utilizando una metodología diseñada por la Alianza para las Resilientes Generaciones de Zurich, la cual fue validada en más de 110 comunidades y 9 países, la que a nosotros, por ejemplo, nos ha servido para poder entender la importancia de la resiliencia en el desarrollo y además monitorear su evolución a lo largo del tiempo. También se han realizado diversas jornadas de capacitación y de desarrollo de capacidades, tomando en cuenta las vivencias y los impactos diferenciados de las comunidades, con el objetivo de que ambos podamos entender las causas del riesgo y entender la forma como las poblaciones responden a estas situaciones de emergencia. Además, con la colaboración de la Universidad de Bristol, hemos impulsado un modelamiento participativo de quebrada, combinando la ciencia de medición de coordenadas en 3D con el conocimiento local, lo cual enriquece estos procesos de investigación. Por otro lado, también se ha formado una red de monitoreo participativo en toda la cuenca, que en estos momentos reúne a más de 70 voluntarios en toda la cuenca, quienes miden las precipitaciones haciendo uso de pluviómetros manuales y contribuyen con esta información al Servicio Nacional de Meteorología e Hidrología aquí en nuestro país. Hemos diseñado algunas estaciones pluviométricas impresas en 3D y usando tecnologías libres, haciéndolas más accesibles para su adaptación y mantenimiento. Y las de la seguridad y el mantenimiento de estas estaciones se encargan tanto los gobiernos locales como las comunidades en donde se han implementado estos sistemas. Con esta información validada y en coordinación con el CENAMI y el INDECI, el Instituto Nacional de Defensa Civil, participantes de la Red Nacional de Alerta Temprana, estamos contribuyendo a elaborar los protocolos, pero también nos estamos acercando a determinar umbrales en la activación de las quebradas. Entonces, consideramos que estas acciones han fortalecido los SAC en varias dimensiones, incrementando la precisión de su información, permitiendo una toma de decisiones.
Let's intervene here. As you are aware, we have lost the audio from the speaker. While we try to get her back, I'll just tell you that Ms. Ordonez is a specialist at Practical Action Latin America. She's a part of the Zurich Foundation program on flood resilience and a member of the global network of civil society organizations for disaster risk reduction. She works as a facilitator of capacity development on hydrometeorological disaster risk management also. I am not sure if she's back. We seem to have completely lost her. So I will move on to my next speaker, who is Dr. Hamidi Han, who is an environmental, I hope I pronounced the last name properly, doctor, environmental remote sensing and GIS analyst by profession, currently working as a disaster risk management specialist for Eastern Africa with the Intergovernmental Authority on Development in the Climate Prediction and Application Center. Dr. Ahmed has over 12 years of experience on the disaster risk reduction, environmental system modeling, and spatial planning and analysis, and capacity development in the economies, in developing economies environment. I do have a question for you before you begin your presentation. From a regional perspective, what are the partnerships needed and how to reinforce multi-level and multi-hazard early warning and early action? And what constitutes effective EWS? And what methodologies and tools are available to design and implement multi-hazard and risk-centered early warning systems that enable action across scales? Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you very much. I would like to start by giving you what original perspective I'll be talking about. IGAD stands for Intergovernmental Authority on Development, with 8 member states in Eastern Africa. I would like to again start by giving you a very good news that in the African continent we managed to establish a hazard early situation room at Africa Union Commission, but also at IGAD, at a regional body, which we believe is a very good step in terms of institutionalizing a multi-hazard early warning center. Let me emphasize that such important collaborations with, of course, UNDRR and Africa Union Commission has really helped us to reinforce actually our efforts to further expand the partnerships, which is quite needed at all scales, I would say. But today I'll be talking about from the point of view, which is from Eastern Africa regional point of view. As we all understand, and as we have been deliberating over the last 2 days, the importance of multi-hazard early warning system cannot be emphasized, given the urgency of time in terms of meeting the 7 targets of Sendai between now and 2013, but also due to the urgency of climate change and frequent and more intense hazards that the Eastern Africa region, for instance, have been experiencing. If I just explain that with example, over the last 4 seasons, the rains have failed for that part of the region with a devastating drought. I am sure this is an example that every one of you might relate with. Hazards are getting more intense, more frequent, calling for such an important instruments like multi-hazard early warning systems. Now, I would like to emphasize one most important and standing challenge. I believe that we are improving in terms of forecast skills, in terms of making early warning information available. The most important standing challenge is now translating early warnings into early action. The drought, which I just mentioned, the early warnings were given almost 1.5 years ago, but that one didn't spare the loss that the region and the member states have incurred due to the prolonged drought. This is, I think, a very good example explaining that early warning information, generation or improvement of early warning informations by no means guarantee an early action. So in my opinion, and IGAD, as IGAD also, we promote and recognize the importance of expanding partnerships, partnerships for knowledge, partnership for capacities with different institutions, could be academia, the research community, and other specialized centers. That is quite important. When we say a disaster risk management is a multi-hazard and multi-sectoral, what it means is it requires more partnerships, not necessarily on the financing aspect only, but quite in different ways. We all understand that one institution cannot undertake the whole set and the whole process of early warning system. Take, for example, floods. The Ministry of Risk Management, the Met offices, as well as the Ministry of Water Resources and more other institutions has to be involved for an effective early warning system and early action. Just to emphasize what I'm trying to say, In terms of a regional multi-hazard early warning system, I would explain it as a process having two important tiers. In the first, you will have, or we need more improved and enhanced capacities in terms of generating early warning systems, improving our forecast skills, generate risk profiles, which is very, very important to be able to produce impact-based forecasts and forecast-based action. But also improving and putting in place a robust risk communication mechanism. This is in the first tier, which is very important, and I believe from East African point of view, there are much improvements over the last few years. In the second tier, which is a bit now of a concern, because we see that early warnings are not guaranteeing early action, or early actions cannot happen by default. Rather, there must be activities that need to be done. We believe that the biggest standing challenge now is how our early warnings can trigger early action. And communities are protected from the adverse impacts of the recurrent hazards. In that regard, in the second tier, things now, or the most important partnership needs is now on, advancing early action, linking early warnings with early action. In that regard, as we all understand, when we talk of early action, the most important things are like institutions, dedicated institutions which are ready to act based on early warning information. That has to do again with capacities. Do we have the capacity in place, whether human capacity, institutional capacity, financial capacity, which is able to, for example, evacuate, as Honorable Minister said, 2.4 million people within a short period of time. That sort of capacity is, I think, quite, and it cannot be overemphasized in the second tier. We also believe, as a regional intergovernmental body, we need to develop institutional frameworks, also regional operating procedures, because it's only then that our member states can act based on a pre-agreed and pre-arranged actions, anticipatory actions, based on early warnings. I think that one is quite important. With that regard, again, I would like to report that as IGAD, we have developed a regional roadmap, which basically is on anticipatory actions, targeting how to move from forecasting the climate to more forecasting the impacts. That is, I think, a very important step, but it's also demanding. It's maybe much easier said than done. It's quite complex, quite challenging, but that is, I think, where we are heading. Once the impact-based forecasts are in place, the most important next step is now how can we generate forecast-based actions, forecast-based anticipatory actions, including pre-financing of anticipatory actions. So can we put in place a mechanism where we'll be acting based on a credible forecast? I think it's all these informations that are constituting a successful partnership, on multi-hazard early warning system. Finally, as a concluding remark, I would like to that IGAD recognizes and is working actually in advancing partnerships. Case in point is, for example, we have joined the RIP Secretariat, which we believe is a very important platform. Again, we have joined the Anticipatory Hub, which is again quite important platforms, particularly for knowledge exchange, learning from the wide, from the wide variety of users and practitioners in early warnings. We are also working with quite a number of partners in advancing multi-hazard early warning systems for early action. With those few remarks, I would rest my case here. Thank you very much. And I would like to appreciate also the organizers, particularly UNDRR. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Dion. Here, I must apologize for the break in transmission while Ms. Ordon was making her address. I think she is now, I understand that we have been reconnected. So if that's the case, I would now throw over to Ms. Ordonez to continue with her presentation.
Muchas gracias, ¿me oyen? Ok, solamente para terminar y cerrar la presentación y decir que estas acciones que hemos venido comentando han fortalecido los sistemas de alerta temprana en varias dimensiones. Primero, incrementando la precisión de su información, permitiendo una toma de decisiones más acertadas y anticipadas por parte de las autoridades, lo que se traduce en reducir los riesgos. Por otro lado, reformulando el rol de la comunidad mediante su participación en la planificación, funcionamiento y sostenibilidad también de los SAT, a la par que los va empoderando a ellos. Y finalmente, logrando incidir a nivel nacional sobre la importancia de un SAT integral e inclusivo que permita la toma de decisiones eficiente, dinámico, así como camino a reforzar la resiliencia. Sin embargo, si bien es cierto que estos modelos de SAT han demostrado buenos resultados, consideramos que aún está pendiente, por ejemplo, una estrategia de alcance nacional y que cuente con el apoyo y el financiamiento para que se asegure la replicabilidad en otros espacios y en otras cuencas también. Desde Practical Action compartimos esta experiencia a manera de contribución con los resultados. Estamos muy felices de poder compartir con ustedes nuestra experiencia, camino de empoderar a las comunidades en acciones que permitan una gestión del riesgo eficiente y adecuada, esperando contar con nuevos aliados hacia esta meta. Y agradecemos la oportunidad y además también estamos muy gustosos de estar aprendiendo de las experiencias que los panelistas están presentando. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ordonez. Okay, we continue with our presentation. And at this point in time, I would like to introduce you, Ms. Saini Mili Tawaki, who is an Inclusive Development Advisor, Pacific Disability Forum. And she's also she's passionate about mainstreaming issues concerning persons with disabilities. And so without any further ado, I will throw over to Ms. Tawaki.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and good evening to everyone, and also to those of you who are zooming in or tuning in today. Now, Nimbula Vinaka. Inclusive governance of early warning engages all people. It considers persons with disabilities, women, indigenous people, young people, and other facets of personal identity. It is also when incident policies, processes, and services are inclusive, accessible, accountable, and responsive to all members of society. Fostering governance that is inclusive is essential to advancing democratic values, including respect for diversity, equality, and also human rights. Inclusive governance of early warning system is very important for persons with disabilities and our organizations. It means, above all other things, that key stakeholders and governments, they need to be accountable to the needs and interests of everyone through empowerment of persons in vulnerable situations and persons in marginalized communities. Inclusive governance must be embedded with early warning to ensure that saving of lives is paramount, including the reduction of injuries and protection of the environment from climate hazards and disaster events. Now, the most Pacific governments have ratified the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and also have endorsed international framework and initiatives such as the Sendai Framework and also the Pacific Framework on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and this was signed by our leaders in 2016. And it focuses on disaster, risk management, and climate change, and all these frameworks are somehow aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals. But when our governments are signed up to this and when our partners, our stakeholders have endorsed this, what does it mean for persons with disabilities? It means that this is a fight that we are not, having it alone. It is a fight that all our key stakeholders and partners are partnering with us to ensure that our needs and concerns are heard and also are recognized and also are implemented to ensure resilience. I will share with you some of the activities from the Pacific with regards to early warning system and inclusive governance. At the Pacific Disability Forum, we have several projects through assistance from the Australian and the New Zealand government under the Australian Humanitarian Program, as well as the CBM, New Zealand and Australia. And we look after 8 countries in the Pacific. So when there's a disaster, we try our best. The Pacific Disability Forum tries our best to send out information to our organizations in these countries, not only specifically to these countries, but to other organizations of persons with disabilities across the Pacific. We have a person who is looking after disaster news, COVID news, and any other news that triggers actions. So with early warning system and inclusive governance, we were able to get our organizations on the ground, disseminate accessible information, simplified information on the weather, bulletins and other advisories to persons with disabilities across Fiji, for example. So 2 years ago in 2020, 2021, at the end of 2020 and 2021, we had 2 cyclones that hit Fiji. And with that cyclone, with the early warning, organizations of persons with disabilities were able to mobilize themselves and get all this information, simplify the information. And for your information, ladies and gentlemen, we have 5 major disability groups. So imagine this information are simplified to suit the need or to respond to the need of different impairment groups, the hearing, the deaf, the blind, those with physical disabilities, those with psychological disabilities. So this information was sort of simplified and it was sent across to different focal points throughout the country. And that was also able through the engagement with the National Disaster Management Office and also the National Disability Focal, which is a semi-government entity. So the addition of persons of information on early warning is very crucial. But at the same time, we find that even when information is available and the system is not ready, and that hinders the implementation or the participation, the effective participation of persons with disabilities to ensure that they make well-informed decisions about their lives and their safety. So for the Pacific Disability Forum, we do coordination. And the coordination, we partner with a lot of our Pacific governments, our intergovernmental organizations, like the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat and the Pacific Community. We also work with our big donors, Australia and the Australian and the New Zealand government, who support us very well when it comes to inclusive disaster risk reduction. So, ladies and gentlemen, we also had a study. We did a study on the climate impact of persons with disabilities in 3 Pacific Island countries. And the study showed that persons with disabilities, they are more vulnerable to all these climate hazards, to climate change, and the impact are so wide, the gap is so wide when it comes to food security, when it comes to health, when it comes to livelihood, production, agricultural production, health, education, and so on. We will launch the report of our study in July, and we are very thankful to the Australian government for supporting us in the study. The challenges, as I've said, that we face in most instances is that when early warning is there and the system is not available, the system is not very friendly to the needs of persons with disabilities, it is us further to a margin where we are marginalized and isolated. So the interesting thing is almost 11 countries have ratified to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. But yet we see a lot of marginalization, poverty, underrepresented in decision-making, economic development, in employment, and even in making decisions. And we are overrepresented when it comes to isolation, violence and abuse. I've mentioned poverty, and in the face of COVID, we are trying to juggle all these, and these are some of the issues that we find. The other issue that we also observed is the connectivity, the need for more investment on inclusive communication. We were, struck with the need to understand how the Zoom platform works and understanding the different platforms and the facilities. And in the Pacific, where we are very prone to disasters and cyclones and earthquakes and so on, the connectivity is not there. We were not able to get across to our organizations of persons with disabilities in Tonga when the volcano erupted in January. We were not able to get across to our organizations or to our branches in the second island of Fiji because the disruptions, connectivity wasn't there, to Kiribati, to Tuvalu, to all these small island states. So connectivity is very important to us because as we are going through the age and also through a time where ICT and technology is needed and it's used everywhere. So for us in the Pacific, for persons with disabilities, we would like to see, when we talk about budgetary allocation resources, building, we would like to see investments from partners and governments on inclusive ICT. Ladies and gentlemen, I will stop there because I know there'll be questions coming in, and I'll be happy to answer the questions, and I will also happy to give you a lot more example specific. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, thank you, Ms. Twake. At this time, I'd like technician to, if we could put the exhibit polls, and we could see what is happening there. The poll results, briefly, please. Thank you. And what I will do, I'm going to be asking each speaker to speak to the polls. And I would invite our first speaker, Mr. Honore, if you could just analyze quickly and give us some response to what you're seeing there.
Well, the top response here clearly indicates that our overall ambition is to serve the people, right? And this is, I guess, a common feeling, engagement that we need to push forward still. From a very technical perspective, I see that the the real technical component of observation and forecasting, which is the part of the WMO business, of course, is comes after, and not so many people put that with a super high level of priority, meaning that we can interpret that it is related to the tremendous progress made in weather forecasting, as an example, in the last decade, but still highlights the fact that you can have the best science, you can have the technology, if you don't make the point in pushing the information to those who need it, then anticipatory action cannot take place fully.
Next, I would like to ask Dr. Amidoun to analyze and give us his opinion on the polls that are exhibited on the screen, please.
Thank you, Chair. What I would say is, I think most of us are agreeing to the pupil-centered early warnings. That very much resonates. I think what we also see on the, I think people, their needs, the way we communicate has to address the needs on the ground. Mismatch between the science and the communities, or the need on the ground, is basically because of maybe the way we generate and disseminate early warning informations. The next one is this last mile is also very much tied. So number one and number two are basically how early warning informations can be more pupil-centered, how we can package early warning informations to the needs of the communities in a way they understand, including, of course, what the panelists have extensively covered in a more inclusive way, the way people can easily understand and also act upon an early warning information. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you, Doc. Ms. Tawaki, the results there indicate that making EWS inclusive, putting people at the center has something like 65%, followed by reaching the last mile with actionable and accessible information, 39%. Your reaction to that?
Yes, thank you. It's very important for us to put persons with disabilities, their families and their communities at the center of every development. And this is the people's approach, so to speak. So we can't exclude persons with disabilities from their families and communities. Like in the Pacific, persons with disabilities live in their families and communities, and their families are their caregivers or their personal assistants, and their families are also their first responders when it comes to disaster risk during times of disaster. So it's very important that the holistic approach, when I'm talking about the holistic approach, that includes the people's approach where persons with disabilities, their families, their environment are at the center of every development, and also in addition, human rights-based approach where persons with disabilities are seen as persons first and consideration when decisions are being made on disabilities. Many times, stakeholders, governments, the partners, it's just a tick in the box to include persons with disabilities. It's about time, and we make an end to that kind of attitude. We are just trying to, to respond to some kind of monitoring and evaluation processes, and that's why we include disabilities, say including them. However, their concerns, their needs, their aspirations are not considered. And how can they participate well in such, particularly in engagement that concerns their lives, They need to be informed. They need to be well informed. Information needs to be accessible. Information needs to be simple. Information that's given to them will allow them to make informed decisions of their safety and also their protection. To inclusive and accessible ICT, that's a big recommendation and a huge recommendation, because we in the Pacific, we, in the face of all these deals, and when there's no connectivity, we are lost. We feel very isolated. We are out of touch from our families and our communities. With the experience that I was sharing with you, those good examples that I was sharing you, we even provide data to patients of persons with disabilities for their members who are hearing impaired, who cannot hear the phone rings, but rely on texting. And we also provide data so that they could talk to us and allow us hear their stories of what's going on, the latest development that is going on. We also provide data for the continuation of the work in the midst of all this disaster and crisis, that the work in organizations of persons with disabilities continue. So these are the very two areas that we feel that is us. Please, we urge you for any development with regards to early warning system, inclusive governance of the system, persons with disabilities, their families, and their communities and their environment need to be at the very center of that approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Ordonez, I'm not sure if you can see the poll results, but I will read the results, and it was a reaction to the question, what should be done to make early warning systems more effective? And 63% initially indicated that making it inclusive by people at the center, followed by reaching the last mile with actionable and accessible information. Your reflection, if you can hear me.
Sí, gracias. Bueno, hay plena coincidencia, creo, entre los ponentes y la sala, la cual nosotros compartimos, que son las personas y deberían ser ellas el centro de atención en los sistemas de alerta temprana. Y es más que esta información que se comparte en los sistemas de alerta tiene que ser una información clara, veraz, oportuna, pero también accesible para todas y todas, porque debería responder estos sistemas de alerta temprana a las necesidades diferenciadas de las diversas comunidades, principalmente en condición de riesgo. Consideramos que la comunicación sin un lenguaje adecuado y sencillo, o sea, no llega y no cumple con su objetivo, que es salvaguardar la vida y los medios de vida de las comunidades. Sin embargo, si la comunicación es en un lenguaje sencillo, es inclusivo, tiene muchas más posibilidades y favorece la salvaguarda de la vida, la protección de los medios de vida y la reducción de riesgo de desastres. Completamente de acuerdo con los resultados que se han presentado. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much. And last, but certainly not least, for the reflection on those polls of Minister, could you go ahead, please?
Thank you very much. What should be done to make early warning system more effective? If I give explanation on the basis of our success in Bangladesh, before any disasters, we can reach the last mile actionable and accessible information to every people, and our volunteers are mostly responsible for carrying the information to last mile of peoples, and also the information created by printing media, electronic media, online media, Facebook, and also other information. So, according to my experience in Bangladesh, that is information is the most important things to disseminate to the every people in the vulnerable areas or disaster-prone areas to make early warning system more effective. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. I would like to ask you a question. How work effectively with disaster response authorities to ensure that early warnings are accurate, trustworthy, and timely? I want to emphasize the word trustworthy because of experiences with our citizens not trusting for one reason or another. Warnings, a hurricane is coming, and they tend to use their experience. Oh, it's going to be turning away, or it's not really coming. So how do you work effectively with disaster response authorities to ensure that early warnings are trustworthy and timely? I'll begin with you.
In countries, we have a central disaster management committee in the ministry, and a minister by his post, he is the chairman of this committee. And there is a district level disaster management committee. In sub-district, there is also a committee. And in union level and ward level of disaster management committees there. And, when a warning is then all the become engaged to disseminate the info to all levels, and especially our volunteers. I have mentioned in my speech that more than 5 million volunteers are working in my countries, and they are trained and they are equipped. They use hand mics and they go door to door for disseminating the information and warning. And that's why the most effective action we can take place during the disaster. And that's why we in Amphan, the last cyclone what we have faced, we have evacuated 2.4 people in 14,000 shelters. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that response. I'd just like to inform the audience that we are going a little over 7. We will try and wrap up 10 minutes after 7. We'll get the responses from the other speakers, so please indulge. Dr. Nadi, could you ask a question for us, please? How to work effectively with disaster response authorities to ensure that early warnings are accurate, trustworthy, and timely.
Thank you very much again for the opportunity. I would put it in the first one is the need to improve the forecast skills and also the way we information. But as we understand, always forecasts are probabilistic. I would say that we need the response authorities to understand also that element of probability and act accordingly. That's very important. But the other angle, or the second point which I would like to emphasize is if a government or response institutions are acting based on a forecast, and if that information turns out to be a false alarm, I think we have to design our interventions, our anticipatory actions and investments that builds community resilience. So no regret investments has to be, I think, included in a way we are responding because we are investing on communities, we are investing on their resilience, we are trying to protect their lives, livelihoods and livelihood assets. I think it has to be framed in a way that even if the forecast is not materialized, it's still an investment on building their resilience and protecting the communities. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Ordonez, if you're there, can you respond to that question, please, in 2 minutes? Thank you.
Ok, sí, claro, muchas gracias por la oportunidad. Sí, bueno, nosotros también queremos comentar de que si para poder lograr esta respuesta de las comunidades, consideramos que los SAT deben articular a los diversos componentes, tanto el componente técnico, científico y comunitario, donde la academia juega un rol importante también, y hay que entender a los SAT como un sistema integrado e inclusivo. Consideramos que si las comunidades son entes activos en la construcción de la información y en la toma de decisiones, las alertas y las alarmas serán más efectivas y cumplirá con el objetivo de salvar vidas y reducir pérdidas y daños. Es decir, las comunidades y las autoridades deben de sumar esfuerzos no solamente en la construcción de la información, sino también en las acciones anticipatorias que se orienten a reducir las pérdidas y los daños. Y nosotros como Practical Action tenemos una filosofía en nuestra intervención. Creemos que los grandes cambios comienzan pequeños y los sistemas de alerta temprana que se diseñan y se implementan desde el corazón de las comunidades se traducen en acciones que transforman vidas y fortalecen la resiliencia. Muchísimas gracias al comité organizador, muchísimas gracias a quienes están en estos momentos en la sala compartiendo con nosotros por darnos la oportunidad de transferirles nuestra experiencia en una partecita del Perú que es la cuenca del río Rima. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ordonez. And I'll ask Ms. Tawaki to give us her response.
Disasters. Preparedness and preparedness is the after getting the early warning and forecast for any disasters. And for the preparedness, we have to prepare our infrastructures, our technical and so many volunteers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And Dr. Amidon.
Very quickly, I think I would re-emphasize the two tiers which I mentioned to be warning system need to be understood and strengthened in all the four components of the early warning system, from risk knowledge to generating early warnings, risk communication, and response capacities. That is, I think, very, very important. The second one is the early action part, which a bit is particularly missing from our region. So early actions cannot happen by default. It should be by design. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And Ms. Ortiz, your 30 seconds, please. Are you still with us? Apparently we have lost that link, so I'll go
sobre los SAT, hemos
here.
mostrado algunos resultados positivos, pero creo que queda un gran reto, que es que estos pequeños esfuerzos que se están haciendo deben convertirse en una estrategia de alcance nacional y que cuente con el apoyo institucional y financiamiento para que estos pequeños SAT se puedan ser sostenibles y además sean replicables en otros contextos también. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much for that. Mr. Waki?
Thank you. For persons with disabilities in our organizations, inclusion is not enough for us. We want meaningful inclusion. Thank you.
And Mr. Honore, your last statements.
Wow, thank you. Well, I guess from my perspective, the key word here is about cooperation, cross-sectoral and interdisciplinary. And my encouragement here would be, don't be shy, talk to your partners, share information, share data, join forces, and also we need the resources to do that, right? To sustain the effort over time, making sure that we progress and make it better year after year over time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. And my last seconds, I will take the last 30 seconds to say that I agree with inclusion from the community level through local governments. Everyone should be included in the decision-making process, and of course, acceleration, so that we will be able to meet the objective of the 2030 agenda. With that, I would like to thank you all for joining us in this session, and I hope you all found it beneficial and setting us on course to achieve objectives as we have outlined. Thank you all for coming, and let's hope we keep it.